As you are probably aware, this weekend is kind of the anniversary of, I guess, when the world seemed to start falling apart. I don't mean to say that too glibly, but it's also the anniversary of our online service. And I wanted to take a look back at what has happened over the past year worshiping together online. It's been a pretty new thing for us here at Philpott. We haven't been too strong on online sorts of ways of connecting in the past, and so there's kind of a learning curve over the past year. And I'd like to take a look and reflect on some of the highlights of this past year. So, first up, do you remember this? I mean, that's a lot of people in one room. There's no masks. Everybody's singing. We were probably shaking hands and hugging and everything. That is the end of February of 2020. This, I want to say it was the last weekend of February in 2020, maybe the second to last. Bunch of people there, all singing "Holy, Holy, Holy" together. It was very special, and that was normal. And then suddenly it wasn't normal anymore. You might recall around this time last year, I think it was March 10th or so. It seemed like everything was happening really quickly. The NBA was canceling games. The World Health Organization said this was a global pandemic. And then Tom Hanks said that he had the virus, and all of us said, uh-oh, this is serious. And again, I don't mean to be too glib, but it is kind of interesting that it's Tom Hanks that really got our attention. So that was February of last year. So this is March 15th of last year. This was our first online service. And so March 13th last year, we put the first video that's on our YouTube channel. It was Russell announcing that we wouldn't be holding a service in person that weekend because the province had asked that there be no gatherings larger than 250 people, which, again, seems crazy now. 250 people in one room, that's unbelievable. But because of that, we wanted to take the precaution of doing a service online. I think, at least in the back of my mind, this would be something we'd do for a couple of weeks or so, and then we get back to normal, which also seems silly to have thought. But this was our first online service. And what you probably don't know, or maybe don't know, is that actually we had been preparing for this online service for a really long time without knowing it. So here's a picture of some of the great folks in our tech team, and right there on the right with the thumbs up, that's Ian Fry. He's the tech team director. And back in September, Ian started collecting quotes for the kind of equipment that you would need to live stream a service, and started designing a system that would allow us to put our services online. So cameras and video switchers and encoders and all sorts of different bits of equipment that would be needed to make that happen. He started collecting these quotes. In November, we approved a budget that included those quotes. Ian ordered the materials, and they arrived right there in that second week of March. A lot of this stuff actually came in. And so that week leading up to the 15th, we were installing this equipment. And what that meant was there were folks in our tech team who were reading manuals and sending emails back and forth about how to set things up. A bunch of volunteers really scrambled to make things happen, to make it possible for us to have an online service. And they pitched in really quickly. So a few of the people who were involved in learning how to use all this brand new equipment, we had Ian Fry, of course, Jay Rayberg, Frank, Jeremy, Katrina, John, Karen, Jessa, and I'm sure I've left some names out. I'm sorry if I forgot your name, but there's a bunch of wonderful folks in our tech team who worked really hard, spent a lot of time to make it possible for us to very quickly go online. And there were other things that happened with that. Here's the room upstairs where we had been recording our services earlier on. You see a lot of lamps there. For a while, a few months, it was basically impossible to buy a video type of lighting anywhere in Canada. And so we had a whole bunch of lamps to make it bright enough for the cameras to work. Kind of a funny thing. And people were able to watch at home and to gather at home, and people sent in some of these photos of what it was like doing church at home in your living room. And here's a few folks from home. So this was all pretty exciting, and we learned how to do some other things that we hadn't done before. Here's a screenshot of a kids service. We started doing kids ministry online on YouTube, and again, that's been a new thing, but Pastor Jan has kind of taken that and run with it. We did some fun stuff. We did a few virtual choirs. Melody set up a way for people who don't have internet access to call a phone number and to listen to our live stream service. So you can call in and listen to the whole thing. And also Cable 14, a local cable channel, made it possible for churches to put their services on cable for free, which has been very appreciated. We've been able to take advantage of that, and some other churches as well. So Sunday mornings at 8 a.m., you can watch last week's service on Cable 14. And then we learned how to do Zoom. We have spent a lot of time on Zoom this past year, and here at the church we've done growth groups and large groups and classes and prayer meetings, and all kinds of things have happened on Zoom. And again, this is all kind of new for us as a church, and there's a lot of volunteers who have made this happen. I wanted to look at some of the numbers and figures from this past year on YouTube. We have had 40,122 views on our YouTube channel over the past 365 days. 366, I guess it is. That's a lot of people watching different videos that we've put up. It's been a total of 10,377 hours watched on our YouTube channel, and 14 countries represented in our regular YouTube viewers. And here's a list of those: the UK, Ukraine, Finland, Singapore, Russia, Canada, USA, Germany, Sri Lanka, Barbados, South Korea, India, Norway, and Thailand. And I know a few people in some of those countries, but there's a few. I wonder who you people are who are watching us. Say hi. We'd like to know you. Maybe some of you know somebody in all of these countries. I'm not sure that I do. And that highlights one of the interesting things about doing church online, is that people who wouldn't usually be able to join us in person have been able to join us. So missionaries who are living overseas have been able to join us online in various ways, which is very cool. People who haven't been able to come for years due to health reasons, maybe they live in a long-term care home or something like that, they've been able to connect with the church and to participate in worship for the first time in many years. And I know for a number of them, that's been very exciting, very encouraging. The other thing, though, is that we are reaching people maybe who wouldn't otherwise be part of our community. If you look at that number of views, you got to figure this isn't all Phil Potters. There's not that many of us. So there's people who haven't been part of our community who have been joining us online. And one of the things that's happened, there's been a few people who have joined our church online, and I assume when we all get together in person, you'll see some faces that you didn't know before who have joined us, and some of those folks have gotten involved and volunteered in different ways. Very exciting. There have been people who have heard the gospel for the first time in their lives because they stumbled across a video that we had on YouTube. And that's pretty cool. And so as much as this has been a hard year and a steep learning curve, I'm looking back and seeing that God has done some pretty neat things even through this medium of online church. And sometimes I think about, the early church or the Apostle Paul. The Apostle Paul writing these letters from prison and sending them out at great expense and having to send somebody on a ship with a letter to deliver it in person. How excited he would have been to have had YouTube at his disposal. I mean, it's pretty cool. And so we can see that God has been at work. God has done some really incredible things just through this online service. And I think we all need to give our thanks to the people in the tech team who have made this possible. They've put in a lot of work behind the scenes. So incidentally, if you'd like to join the tech team, Ian is really good at teaching you how to do all this stuff. He knows a lot, and he will make it easy for you. So if you'd like to get involved, that would be great. So that's what I'm thinking. This past year has been crazy, but we've seen some really cool things happen. We've seen that God has done some really neat things. And I want us to keep that in mind as you're probably going to be reflecting in a few different ways over what's happened this past year. keep in mind that God has been doing things that we wouldn't have ever expected here at Philpott, even through this online service. I'd like to ask you a couple of questions, things you can think about over the coming week. The first question: how has life changed? You're going to be reminded of this a lot over the next couple of weeks. We were just talking earlier. Remember that time last year when you couldn't buy toilet paper anywhere? That was crazy. And now it's over and you can buy toilet paper wherever you want to, or you couldn't buy flour for a while, and things were kind of strange. Think about how life has changed for you over this past year. And it might be good to just write down some things that come to mind. And then the second question is, where was God in this? In all of the changes that have happened in your life, where was God? And we've seen that God has been at work in our church. We've seen that God has been at work through the online service and in many other ways in our church over this past year. And this is a good question to think about in prayer. Now, next week, we're going to be using a very ancient way of praying and reflecting on what God has been doing in our lives. And this will be part of our Lent prayer practices. So we're going to come back to this question, where was God in this, next week? But be thinking about it this week in preparation for that. Certainly, I think we can say that God has been good to us over the past year as a church.